28th of April, Rabbi Moore, Parsha with Rashi, Tazria-Metzora.
And creation of the form.
Right.
Bria refers to the creation of the matter, whereas Yetzira, as Lashon Tzura, is a creation of the form.
Uh-huh.
So therefore, that's what it says with regarding in the creation of heaven and earth. So it says, Bereshis bara Elokim Shamayim v'Saaretz. It uses Lashon Bria. And afterwards it says, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim Sa'adam. Also it says regarding the entire Bria as well. It says, Vayitzer Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. Okay. Anyway, Kashem sheyitziraso shel Adam acha kol behema, right? Similarly, as in the same way as the creation of man came about after all the animals.
Right.
The kol behema chaya v'oif.
And the wild animals and the fowl.
Right.
Okay. B'masei Rashi, at the act of creation. Okay. Kach Torato nit Parsha. So his law is explained.
Right.
Okay.
Elaborated on.
Okay.
Toras behema chaya v'oif.
Okay. After the law of cattle, beasts, and fowl, it says.
And we're referring to the laws of Tumah. This is what I had in last week's Parsha with the Parsha Shmini. So the laws of Tumah, of a dead animal, behema, chaya, oif, which is kosher, which is not kosher, which are considered impure, behemas, tameos, and also with regard to the, for instance, a dead animal, an animal that's had undergone shchita, kosher shchita, does not exude tumah. Doesn't give off tumah.
That's interesting.
But an animal, a dead animal is called a nevela, means it died either of natural causes or it was killed, but not in the kosher way, not through shchita, then that does exude tumah. Okay? By the way, I think I mentioned this a number of times. Rabbi Shamshin Fol Hirsch, he gives a very interesting, should we say, introduction to this all these, last week's Parsha, this week's Parsha, this whole concept of Tumah. So basically, he explains that Tumah is created by the, how should we say, an element of a loss of life. Anything that had life in it, and the life, to a certain degree, the life was removed from it, then that produces the result, that produces tumah. So therefore, for instance, we're going to see later on in the Parsha, first, let's think a dead being, right? A dead human being, obviously that's the highest, because the higher level the person is in his lifetime, his death creates a stronger level of tumah. Okay, so the highest level is a human corpse. Then you have animal corpses, that's nevela. Okay, and similarly you have a sheretz, certain types of tumah. But insects, very small insects, do not give tumah. Whatever, that's one type. Now, beginning of this week's Parsha says a woman who gives birth also becomes Tomei. Why is that? Because now you've got two different stages. The Parsha says over here, the Torah says she has Tumah in the same way as a woman who is a nida, right? Who menstruates, she also becomes Tomei. Why is that? So a nida had a potential of life, meaning every time she menstruates, so she produces an egg, and that egg, if it's fertilized, will produce a life. So this is her egg is like a potential life. And therefore, once it spoils at the end of it's not germinated, and afterwards it spoils at the end of after a certain amount of time, and before a woman has her period, right? The idea is that the period comes about is that the woman expels this egg, which originally had the potential of producing a life, but since it wasn't germinated, the body now expels it. So that in itself is like expelling what was originally her potential life. That causes tumah. And here we're talking about an actual woman who gives birth, even though something, Baruch Hashem, she had the child inside her, now the child came out and now is living on its own, Baruch Hashem. But nevertheless, as far as her body is concerned, she had a life within her, and that life has now been expelled from her. So therefore, she now becomes Tomei as a result. Okay?
Very interesting. Yes. Very nice. Okay, so it says Ki Tazria, when a woman conceives, L'rabot she'afilu she'yiladato machoi.
Right.
Okay.
Even if she gave birth to if you want to call it a squashed fetus, that means it could have originally, when it was conceived, it could have produced a life, but then whatever got messed up, whatever reason, and it didn't actually properly germinate, and therefore now, instead of being continuing to develop into a viable fetus, the whole thing gets messed up. And the whole thing becomes don't I call it a scrambled egg, but something. Understand? The whole thing gets squashed and dissolves, right?
It dissolves. Okay. And
that means that the actual fetus became got to return to its original state of seed.
Right. Sort of like fluid, it says. Okay. Imo tme'ah leda. His mother is impure.
She expelled such a liquid or whatever, something which was originally potential fetus, and then afterwards it got dissolved or whatever. Then the mother becomes Tomei, because in itself it's also considered like a birth. It's not a viable birth, but it is a birth. Right. It's expelling of this something which was originally a fetus. By the way, it's interesting. It's only after 40 days. Anything which a woman expels from her womb within 40 days, right? If the fetus hasn't developed for 40 days, so the fetus is not 40 days old, then it's considered like nothing. It's considered like a period. It's like a regular menstruation. If after 40 days, then it may depend on what the consistency of what the woman expels. And also, if she miscarries after 40 days, then she gets din of tumas later. Depending if the fetus is halachically considered like a fetus. Okay, let's continue the next Rashi. Kimei nidas devoisa titma.
Okay, Kimei nidas dota.
Devota.
Devota, right. Devota. Titma. Okay, during her days of the menstrual infirmity. Okay, she becomes impure. Keseder kol tuma, the order of all impurity, I guess. Ha'amura nida. It's stated that the woman who is impure due to menstruation, mitam'a bitum'at leda,
is when she's become Tomei as a result of their birth.
Right.
It's the same, all rules that apply to Tuma, which is mentioned with regard to a woman who menstruates. The Nida, then a woman who gives birth also has all the similar halachas of a woman who gives a woman who gives birth has similar halachas as well.
Right. Vafilu niftach hakever below dam, and even if it's without blood.
Right, even if the kever has opened without dam. Now, here the term kever, which normally refers to a grave, is used the euphemism for the womb.
For the womb.
It's interesting. The Mefarshim explain that why is a womb called a kever? Because really it's actually signifies what Be'etzem a kever is. A kever is a temporary dwelling for the body when the soul is absent. Because we believe in, obviously, that's going to be Tchias HaMesim, there's going to be the resurrection of the dead. So for the time being, when a person dies, so his soul leaves him, his soul goes up to heaven, and the body remains here on earth and gets put in a grave. But when there's going to be Tchias HaMesim, the soul is going to be rejoined with its body and relive again. Right. So the kever is the temporary abode of the soul, of the body, when the soul is not there. So too, the womb is a temporary abode for the person, for the human being who's being created. Before the actual he comes out into the world, and then he becomes a independent, living, viable being. His temporary dwelling is in the womb,
right?
And therefore, that's why it's given a euphemism of a kever.
Okay.
And now, so he's saying over here
I wonder
that if a woman gives
about
birth,
the word euphemism, Rabbi. I was thinking it's a euphemism is a nicer way to say something, but kever is actually a worse way to say something on the surface of it.
It depends how you understand. I hear what you're saying. Okay. Anyway, what I want to mention over here is that the thing is that if a woman gives birth, which can happen, a woman gives birth without any blood. There's just the maybe the what do you call it? The fluid from the placenta and from the sac of the right. But there's nothing. It can happen that there's no bleeding. Okay, even though it's maybe a very rare situation, but the most it is possible. So even if that's the possibility. Telling you over, even if she gives birth without any bleeding whatsoever, she still has tumor, but merely by the fact that now, as I mentioned before, she had a viable living being inside her, and now that has been ejected, and that living being is no longer inside her. So therefore, that in itself will cause the tumor, even if there's no blood whatsoever. Okay, just let's do the one more Rashi here, finish the pasuk, and we can read the rest.
Right. His infirmity. It says Lashon Davar Hazav Migufa. That it's a language of something flowing from her body.
Right.
Lashon Hair, another.
The first explanation, this is referring to the menstrual flow, which happens when a woman has menstruation. There's a flow of blood. So that's devoisa, her flow.
Oh, okay. So Lashon Acher, Lashon Madveh.
V'choili.
V'choli. Oh, an illness.
When she is sick. Otherwise, when a woman, as Rashi is going on to explain, when a woman has a period, then she has she feels unwell. She'ein isha lo yadam, shelo techle v'roisha ve'vorea kvedim oleh. There's no woman who has, when she has a menstruation, that she feels sick, and her head and her limbs feel heavy upon her. And she feels like under the weather.
Right.
So that's she's called Dova, devoisa, feeling of unwellness. Maybe that's the best way of translating it. Okay?
Right.
Very good. So we're going to hold it here. Tomorrow I'm not going to be able to give the share, but Be'ez Hashem will be back on Wednesday. Okay?
Very good.
Okay, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you. All too. Be well.
Hey,
Take care, Lou.